Title: The Angels' Rest Chapel, Part 1, The Family That Preached Death. Clapperboard opening hook. In the heart of South Carolina's swamps, where Spanish moss hangs like ghosts and the air feels thick with secrets, there's a place the locals still whisper about. A chapel, now crumbling, where 1,200 people vanished without a trace. They called it Angels' Rest. What if I told you it was never a house of God, but a trap, built by a family who believed they were chosen to deliver salvation, through death? What you're about to hear was hidden for nearly 2 centuries, sealed away by the authorities, erased from church records, buried in fear. But now, it's time the truth came to light. This story is not for everyone. Only those brave enough to face the darkest parts of American history. If you're ready, hit subscribe, and let us know what state you're listening from. We need to see how far these secrets still travel. Now, let's go back to 1789, to the beginning of the Whitworth family's reign of terror. Studio Microphone Part 1, The Empire of Shadows. In the year 1789, the wounds of the American Revolution were still fresh. The country was young, hopeful, and deeply divided. In the low country of South Carolina, where rice plantations stretched toward the Atlantic, life was brutal, quiet, and ruled by power. About 30 miles inland from Charleston, on the edge of a murky swamp, a man named Gabriel Whitworth bought a 1,000-acre property. He named it Seraphim's Grace. Gabriel was 43, tall, silver-haired, with eyes as cold as winter. Born into Virginia's crumbling planter class, Gabriel had watched his family's fortune collapse after the war. But where others saw loss, Gabriel saw opportunity, and he was willing to take it by any means necessary. His wife, Constance Whitworth Pemberton, came from old Charleston money, her family's wealth built on rice and the slave trade. She was beautiful in a fragile, porcelain way. But people who looked closely noticed something unsettling in her eyes. Like she was watching the world from somewhere far away. The Whitworths had 6 children. Their oldest son, Ezekiel, was 24. Cold, cruel, and brilliant. He had his father's mind, but none of his restraint. Miriam, the only older daughter, was 22. Sweet on the outside, like a perfect Southern lady. But she could lure someone in with kindness, and lead them straight to their death without blinking. She seemed to enjoy it. Then there were the twins, Cain and Abel, both 20. Cain was strong, intimidating, his hands looked like they were built to kill. Abel was the thinker. He designed tools and techniques for extracting confessions and information, slowly. Painfully. Both believed they were carrying out God's judgment. The youngest, Lilith, was just 16. Blonde, graceful, and eerily quiet. She was already being groomed to take over Miriam's role. Gabriel saw her as the future of their ministry. And then there were Gabriel's brothers. Michael Whitworth, 2 years younger, was the overseer of the plantation. Rougher than Gabriel, sunburned and scarred from field work, but just as smart. Michael ran the day-to-day operations, kept the books clean, and paid off the right people. Michael's wife had died 5 years earlier in childbirth, leaving him with twin daughters, Mercy and Grace, now 13. They lived in the main house and were already being taught the family's special brand of religion. The youngest brother, Raphael, who went by Seraph, was 35. He had studied medicine in Scotland before the Revolution. Pale, thin, with almost white hair and pale green eyes, Seraph had the look of someone who had seen too much. He never practiced regular medicine. Instead, he used his skills to make victims last longer, and make their deaths look natural. The trap they built. The plantation was a perfect cover. A large Georgian-style mansion overlooked endless rice fields. But it wasn't the main house that held the family's secrets. Half a mile down a winding path, beneath a canopy of moss-covered oaks, stood a white chapel. It looked peaceful, safe, but beneath the altar was a hidden door that led to a basement made of stone, thick walls, soundproof, with several cells. This is where people disappeared. Next to the chapel was another small building, Seraph's laboratory. It looked like a storage shed, but inside were surgical tables, saws, medical books, and preserved specimens. The Order of Fallen Angels. In 1789, Gabriel founded what he called the Order of Fallen Angels. He claimed it was a revival movement, Methodist in nature, focused on redemption and salvation for the desperate and broken. But behind the sermons was a network. Through contacts in Charleston, Savannah, and as far away as Richmond, they spread word. There was a place called Angels' Rest, where runaways and outcasts could find refuge and freedom. The rumors were convincing. They even created fake testimonies from people who had supposedly escaped to the north. They gave passwords, directions, promises. Slaves who heard these stories believed them, because they needed to believe. But those who reached Angel's Rest never made it out again. The business of death. Seraph supplied bodies to medical schools. Charleston, Savannah, even Philadelphia. He claimed they were free black people who had died naturally. The schools asked no questions. The documents were forged. The bodies were cleaned up. The truth was buried. Michael handled the plantation, kept the front operation running, and coordinated with bounty hunters and informants. Anyone who grew suspicious was either paid off, or silenced. By 1832, over 1,200 people had vanished through that chapel door. And no one stopped them. Closing for part 1. So how did this monstrous operation go unnoticed for so long? What made the Whitworths so untouchable? And how did it all finally fall apart? In part 2, we'll uncover the web of lies, the religious deception, and the terrifying rituals practiced by the Order of Fallen Angels. Make sure you're subscribed. And remember, this story may be history, but its shadows are still alive. Studio Microphone Part 2, The Machinery of Mercy. By 1791, the Whitworths were no longer simply a respected plantation family, they had become something far more dangerous. Their operation, masked by faith and Southern gentility, had grown into a well-oiled system of deception, torture, and profit. And it ran on one thing: belief. The belief of the people who came seeking salvation, and the belief of the family who saw themselves as instruments of divine justice. The rice plantation itself appeared normal from the outside. About 100 enslaved workers tended the fields and lived in conditions that were, by comparison, shockingly humane. Better food, decent cabins, limited freedom to move about. Word even spread that Seraphim's grace was a kinder place to live. That reputation was intentional. Gabriel Whitworth had carefully built it to keep suspicion at bay. He understood the value of perception. His workers' comfort wasn't kindness, it was camouflage. But the most chilling aspect of the entire operation wasn't the brutality. It was how deeply Gabriel and his family believed they were doing the Lord's work. Gabriel's sermons were masterful, thunderous, poetic, filled with scripture. He truly believed that the people who came to Angel's Rest were damned souls. He saw himself not as a killer, but as a purifier. A tool of God's final judgment. That belief gave him peace. And it allowed his entire family to carry out mass murder with complete moral certainty. Even local authorities, who quietly suspected something was wrong, found it difficult to act. Gabriel was deeply woven into the social fabric. He served on the local county commission, donated large sums to local churches, and regularly hosted grand parties attended by the elite of Charleston and the surrounding towns. When whispers emerged about missing slaves or strange travelers seen heading toward the chapel, Gabriel would express polite concern, offer search help, and point the finger elsewhere. He always seemed helpful, and always stayed above suspicion. But everything escalated in the autumn of 1791. A series of violent storms tore through the low country, destroying crops and pushing dozens of enslaved people to flee their plantations in search of safety, or freedom. For the Whitworths, this was not a crisis. It was opportunity. In just 1 month, 43 desperate souls arrived at Angel's Rest Chapel. It was the largest influx they'd ever seen. And this is when the family's process became truly refined. The sorting process. Ezekiel, ever the strategist, devised a system to categorize the victims. He and his siblings called it sorting the flock. Young, healthy men were kept alive the longest. Their knowledge about escape routes, plantation layouts, watch schedules, was extremely valuable to the bounty hunters the Whitworths worked with. Women, especially those with children, were coaxed into revealing family connections and upcoming escape plans. Their fear made them talk more easily. Elderly escapees, or those with little strategic value, were dealt with quickly, killed within hours, their bodies prepared for shipment. But regardless of their category, every arrival was greeted the same way. Miriam would welcome them personally. Her voice was soft, her manners refined. She brought food, clean clothes, and promised them rest. She told them the family needed to verify their stories before helping them move north. It sounded reasonable, even kind. She explained that the delay was necessary to protect the Underground Railroad from spies and imposters. It worked. People trusted her. During these early days, the Whitworths collected as much information as possible through casual conversation. Names, places, family members still enslaved, planned meeting spots, safe houses. Gabriel led daily prayer services at the chapel, gradually pulling more personal stories from his guests. The twins, Cain and Abel, posed as escaped slaves from other plantations, trading made-up escape stories to gain trust and draw out further details. Once the family had what they needed, the truth arrived. The chapel basement. Each victim was taken to the hidden basement beneath the altar. A hallway with 5 heavy wooden doors. Each cell lined with thick stone walls and shackles. Completely soundproofed. Services continued in the chapel above. Hymns, sermons, praise, while screams echoed below, unheard by anyone who wasn't meant to hear them. Seraph's medical training made the family's torture methods disturbingly efficient. He didn't rely on brute force. He used pressure points, nerve clusters, psychological tactics that could keep someone alive and talking for days. Pain without damage. He ensured the bodies could be sold later, whole, clean, and marked as natural deaths. Abel took detailed notes during these sessions. He cross-checked testimonies with past victims, creating profiles of underground railroad routes, contacts, and hiding places. The Ledger of the Damned. Gabriel kept a book. Actually, many books. Every person who entered Angel's Rest was assigned a number. Their name, age, physical description, story, the intelligence they revealed, and how they died. It was all recorded. Nothing was left to memory. The Whitworths treated murder like a business. Their records revealed patterns. Certain plantations had higher escape attempts. Certain times of year were more active. Certain names popped up again and again: safe house operators, field leaders, rogue preachers helping slaves escape. This information was sold. The Whitworths worked with 3 major slave-catching outfits, stretching from Virginia to Georgia. Their data was gold. One successful raid, based on Whitworth intelligence, could bring in thousands of dollars. That money was split between the family and their criminal partners. But the real profit came from the dead. The body trade. Seraph's body trade was unmatched in the South. He had direct connections to medical schools in Charleston, Savannah, Richmond, and even Philadelphia. The schools didn't care where the bodies came from, as long as the paperwork looked clean, and the price was right. Each body brought in between $50 to $100, a fortune at the time. Especially when shipped in batches. Seraph used preservation methods he had learned in Edinburgh, special mixtures that kept cadavers fresh enough for dissection. The bodies were packed in pine boxes, labeled with false identities, and quietly loaded onto wagons or small boats that traveled through the swampy waterways toward the coast. Lilith joins the family business. During this period, Lilith, just 16, began playing a more active role. At first, she simply helped greet new arrivals. Her youth and soft smile made people feel safe. She was like an innocent child, a symbol of hope. But it was a lie. Lilith showed no emotion when victims disappeared. No fear, no sadness. Gabriel took this as a sign that she was ready. She would soon begin learning Miriam's role. Charm, misdirection, manipulation. The legacy had to continue. Closing for Part 2. By the end of 1791, the Whitworth family had perfected their process. They were no longer just killers hiding behind a chapel, they were engineers of faith-based death, using religion, psychology, and medicine to feed an empire of pain. But cracks would soon appear. And in Part 3, we'll explore the outsiders who started asking questions, and the chilling rites that marked the Whitworths' rise to something more than human. Stay with us. Studio Microphone Part 3, The Southern Redemption Society. By 1795, the Whitworth family's dark operation had evolved far beyond what Gabriel had originally imagined. What had started as a secret way to make money from runaways had grown into a cold, organized, and deeply connected criminal network that stretched across 4 southern states. They called it the Southern Redemption Society. At the surface, the Whitworths still played the role of model citizens. Every Sunday, they attended services at the local Methodist church, where Gabriel often preached. His sermons stirred emotions: fire, brimstone, repentance. Nobody suspected what lay beneath his holy words. The Whitworths hosted dinner parties. Constance, ever the elegant wife, became known for her embroidery and her leadership in women's charities. They donated money to local causes and threw lavish gatherings that drew Charleston's elite. To the outside world, they were everything a Southern family should be. But behind this polished image, the family was leading a cult built on blood and profit. A network of shadows. The Southern Redemption Society brought together planters, merchants, corrupt preachers, and even professional bounty hunters, people who believed in Gabriel's twisted theology. They met in secret, disguising their meetings as religious revivals or seasonal gatherings. Membership wasn't free. Each person paid dues based on how much they earned from society-related activities. That money was used to bribe officials, expand operations, and silence threats. One of the society's most valuable members was Dr. Edmund Thorne, a respected physician in Charleston. He signed off on death certificates, claiming the Whitworth victims had died of fever or natural causes. His connections with ship captains kept the body shipments moving north, unnoticed. Captain Marcus Fulton controlled a ring of slave catchers across the Carolinas and Georgia. His men used the Whitworth's intelligence to track down escapees. They didn't just capture one or two, they hunted entire families. For every successful raid, the Whitworths received a share of the bounty. But the most disturbing ally was Reverend Josiah Blackwood, a Methodist minister who oversaw churches in 3 counties. He passed information from his sermons, names of congregants who might try to escape. Then he would lead funeral services for the very people he betrayed, claiming they had died from illness, never suspecting the truth. Expanding the machine. As the society grew, so did the need for better systems. Gabriel created a coded writing system, embedding hidden meanings in religious-sounding letters. These messages shared escape plans, safe house details, and names of targets. Years later, this code was finally broken, providing historians with hard evidence of the society's scale and sophistication. Seraph, once just the family's torturer, became something more. He developed detailed maps of escape patterns, tracking which months had more flight attempts, which routes were most common, and which regions needed more surveillance. The chapel at Seraphim's Grace became a training center. Gabriel led private lectures for new members, teaching them how to justify cruelty through scripture. Seraph gave medical lessons on how to cause pain without visible injury. Miriam taught techniques to win trust, especially from women and children. By 1797, the basement of the chapel had been enlarged to hold 12 cells. A new crematorium was built and disguised as a pottery kiln, used to burn bodies that couldn't be sold. The family hired 6 new workers, all society members, to handle the rising number of victims. These new recruits helped clean, transport, and, when needed, dispose of evidence. Lilith, now 18, had become a key part of the operation. Her specialty was dealing with female victims and children. She had learned how to project warmth and sympathy, even as she used a mother's tone to extract secrets, or threats against their children to force confessions. Her ability to mask cruelty with compassion made her perhaps the most dangerous Whitworth of them all. The twins had developed their own roles. Cain managed physical operations, keeping the facilities in order, transporting bodies, and destroying traces. Abel ran the records, making sure no detail was forgotten. Together, they could process victims within 48 hours, maximizing profits and minimizing risk. Suspicion from the north, but their success came at a cost. By the late 1790s, northern abolitionists began noticing a troubling pattern. Escaped slaves traveling through the South Carolina Low Country often disappeared, completely. Underground railroad conductors in the north reported that whole families had vanished after leaving certain plantations. In Philadelphia, a Quaker merchant named Jeremiah Morrison began asking questions. He was a quiet man, about 45, with a rough exterior and sharp instincts. His faith had led him into dangerous work before, helping escapees, tracking injustices. Now, he was investigating why so many people disappeared in one part of South Carolina. Morrison interviewed escapees in Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. Many had heard rumors of a sanctuary called Angel's Rest, a chapel deep in the swamp where runaways could find food and guidance. Some had gone there. Most had left quickly, saying the place felt wrong. Others had sent friends and family, never to hear from them again. The same names, same location, same story. He needed proof. But as a white man, Morrison couldn't get close to the underground world where escapees lived and traveled. That's when Samuel Washington stepped forward. The infiltrator. Samuel was a free black man from Baltimore, educated and brave. He had already infiltrated slave-catching networks in Virginia and Maryland. Now, he offered to pose as an escaped slave and go to Angel's Rest himself. He arrived in Charleston in March of 1799, carrying fake documents identifying him as a runaway from Virginia. He blended in easily, working simple jobs, making contacts, asking quiet questions. Soon, word reached him about Angel's Rest. He let it happen naturally, telling his story to trusted people, letting them connect him to someone with directions. In April, he received the location and the password needed to prove himself a true seeker. Meanwhile, Morrison, posing as a merchant, gathered documents. He accessed shipping records and death certificates. What he found confirmed his worst fears: regular shipments of preserved bodies from Charleston to northern medical schools. Too many. Far too many to be normal. The death certificates all claimed fevers, natural causes. Most listed the deceased as free people of color, transients. But Morrison had seen too many patterns. Something evil was being disguised as mercy. The arrival. It was a humid April evening when Samuel Washington approached Angel's Rest Chapel. Just as described, it stood larger than most plantation chapels, with tall Gothic windows and weathered stone. Spanish moss hung like curtains of death, and the air stank of swamp water and rotting leaves. Miriam Whitworth answered the door. She was just as beautiful as the stories had said: golden hair, calm eyes, and a voice like honey. She smiled warmly and said, "You must be so tired, poor soul. Come in, let me get you food and a place to rest. Tomorrow, we'll talk about your journey north." Washington entered, cautious but calm. The chapel was lavish inside, stained glass windows showing strange, violent scenes. An angel striking down demons. Fire and punishment. It didn't feel like a sanctuary. It felt like a stage. He was given a small room with clean clothes and warm food. Miriam explained that the family just needed time to verify his identity, and that the delay was only to protect the Underground Railroad. That night, Washington didn't sleep. He listened, watched, took mental notes, and waited. Closing for Part 3. The trap was closing, but Samuel Washington was not an ordinary man, and the Whitworths were about to discover that not every soul who entered Angel's Rest would be lost. In Part 4, we follow Washington deeper into the chapel's dark heart, and witness the first cracks in the Whitworth family's perfect machine. Stay with us. Studio Microphone Part 4, The Devil's Sanctuary. Samuel Washington didn't sleep that first night at Angel's Rest Chapel. The food was warm, the room was clean, but none of it felt safe. The quiet hum of night insects was broken only by the occasional creak of floorboards, or a low voice drifting through the chapel walls. Samuel lay still, eyes open, ears alert. He was deep behind enemy lines now. The next morning, Miriam returned. She brought a tray of breakfast and offered a sweet smile. Her voice was gentle. "Brother Gabriel would like to meet you today," she said. "He wants to hear your story." Samuel nodded, playing the part. He kept his expression tired, grateful, but inside, he was memorizing everything: her tone, her words, even the smell of her perfume. He was trained for this. Meeting the prophet. That afternoon, Samuel was escorted into the main chapel. The large wooden doors creaked open to reveal Gabriel Whitworth himself. He stood near the altar, tall and commanding, dressed in simple preacher's clothes. His silver hair shone in the candlelight, and his pale blue eyes studied Samuel with a strange intensity. "Welcome, son," Gabriel said. "I hear you've traveled far." Samuel bowed his head slightly. "Yes, sir. From Virginia. I was told this place could help me find my way north." Gabriel nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps it can, but the journey to freedom begins with honesty. We must be sure you are who you say you are. Deception is the devil's tongue." Over the next hour, Gabriel asked question after question. Where was Samuel born? Who was his master? How did he escape? What plantations had he passed through? Samuel had rehearsed it all. He gave just enough detail to sound real, but vague enough that nothing could be verified. He mixed truth with lies, just like Gabriel did in his sermons. Gabriel seemed pleased. "We'll help you," he said finally. "But we must first pray for guidance." Layers of deception. For the next 3 days, Samuel lived under constant watch. He was fed, clothed, and treated with kindness. Lilith brought him water. Miriam sang hymns while cleaning the chapel. Gabriel preached to him about salvation and destiny. It was all a performance. But Samuel noticed the cracks. He saw Cain moving crates into the outbuilding behind the chapel late at night, always alone. He heard low groans beneath the chapel floor during services. And once, in the early morning, he caught sight of Seraphim walking from the woods with blood on his sleeves. The signs were everywhere, if you looked closely enough. Samuel's instincts screamed at him to leave. But he stayed. He needed proof. The hidden door. On the 4th night, Samuel made his move. While the family slept, he slipped from his room and crept into the chapel. He had seen Gabriel linger behind the altar earlier that day, hands resting on the wall, fingers tracing a seam in the wood. Now, in the dark, Samuel found it, a hidden panel. It swung open with a soft click. Behind it, a narrow staircase led downward into pitch black. He descended. The air turned cold and damp. The smell of rotten chemicals filled his nose. Below the chapel was a long stone hallway lined with thick wooden doors, cells. From inside, he heard whispers. Crying. Chains rattling. He was standing inside the very heart of the Whitworth operation. The cell block. The basement had 12 cells, each with thick iron bars and heavy locks. Some were empty, others held people, weak, starving, terrified. One woman, barely alive, whispered to him, "Please, don't let them take my boy." Samuel whispered back, "Where is your son?" Her voice cracked. "The girl took him. Said she'd keep him safe." Lilith. Samuel's stomach turned. He tried opening the cell door, but it wouldn't budge. Too heavy, too old. He needed keys, or help. He moved quietly through the hallway, passing a heavy door with strange symbols carved into the wood. It looked newer than the rest. A muffled sob came from behind it. He didn't open it. He couldn't risk being caught. Instead, he slipped back upstairs before dawn, heart pounding, mind racing. He had seen enough. Gathering evidence. The next day, Samuel kept calm. He sat in prayer, smiled, ate, but in his head, he was building a report. The number of cells, the names he overheard, the patterns of movement, the faces of the victims. That night, he sneaked into the outbuilding. Inside, he found Seraph's laboratory. It was filled with tools, scalpels, clamps, jars of preserved organs. Along one wall stood crates labeled for shipment. Each had a fake name, a death certificate, and a sealed container inside. He opened one. A young man's body lay inside, eyes open, skin pale and stiff. Samuel's hands shook. He had seen enough. Escape. But leaving was harder than entering. The plantation was surrounded by water, with only 2 routes out. One path led through the swamp. The other past the overseer's quarters, guarded by dogs. He chose the swamp. That night, with stolen food and a stolen knife, he slipped into the wet dark. Mosquitoes bit his skin, mud sucked at his boots. Strange animal cries echoed through the trees. But he kept moving. After hours of struggling, he reached dry ground, and a safe house run by a freedman named Caleb, one of Morrison's allies. There, Samuel collapsed. Back in Charleston, Jeremiah Morrison was waiting in Charleston, posing as a rice merchant. When Samuel arrived days later, wounded and exhausted, he brought the first direct proof of what was happening at Seraphim's Grace. He described the basement, the people inside, the body shipments, and the lies. Morrison took notes, gathered documents, and prepared a case to send to abolitionist leaders in Philadelphia and Boston. The truth about the Whitworth family was finally coming to light. But the society would not go down without a fight. Closing for Part 4. Samuel Washington survived Angel's Rest. But many had not. Now, with the secrets exposed, the battle between the society and the abolitionists had begun. What followed would shake the South, and the Whitworth family, to its core. In Part 5, we'll follow the society's desperate attempts to cover their tracks, and the deadly consequences that follow when the hunted become the hunters. Stay with us. Studio Microphone Part 5, The Society Strikes Back. The moment Samuel Washington's report reached abolitionist circles in the North, everything began to shift. For 10 years, the Whitworth family and their Southern Redemption Society had operated in shadows, untouchable, invisible. But now, the light had found them. In July of 1799, the Pennsylvania Abolition Society shared Samuel's testimony with a small network of trusted allies. 3 other escaped survivors confirmed key details: the chapel's location, the name, Seraphim's Grace, and the disturbing presence of Seraph Whitworth, the man in white who had poked and sliced while praying aloud. The society had murdered hundreds. And now, they were being hunted. A storm of secrets. Back in South Carolina, the Whitworths sensed something was wrong. A few of their Charleston contacts went silent. One shipment of bodies was returned from a medical school in Philadelphia with a note: "Do not contact us again." Gabriel called an emergency meeting. He paced the floor of the great room at Seraphim's Grace, his hands shaking in a rare display of emotion. The family was all there: Constance, cold and silent; Miriam, expressionless; the twins, arms crossed; Seraph, calmly sipping tea. "We've been infiltrated," Gabriel growled. Someone made it out. Everyone's eyes turned to Miriam. She had been the one to greet Samuel. Had she missed something? I checked his papers myself, she whispered. He played the part perfectly. Gabriel's fist slammed the table. There are no excuses now. We're exposed. The purge begins. The family moved fast. Seraph burned all correspondence. The chapel's hidden basement was emptied. Victims who hadn't yet been processed were disposed of. The crematorium ran non-stop for 3 days. Cain and Abel dismantled cells, buried chains, erased bloodstains. Lilith, now 19, oversaw the removal of any children being held in the main house. Their fate was sealed in silence. Gabriel sent coded letters to every society member across the South. Destroy records, clean house, no contact. But it was already too late. Enemies within. One of the society's own, Drive, Edmund Thorne, had begun to panic. When Philadelphia medical schools cut ties, he knew the risk of exposure had skyrocketed. The money was no longer worth the danger. Secretly, he contacted an abolitionist lawyer in New York, offering documents in exchange for immunity. Within weeks, his testimony joined Washington's in the hands of Northern newspapers. The headline in the Boston Patriot read, "Greater than, Southern Chapel of Death, medical schools involved in human trafficking and murder." Shockwaves rippled across the young nation. Backlash in the North. Public outrage exploded. Students at the College of Physicians of Philadelphia protested in the streets. A Boston professor resigned, admitting he had unknowingly accepted bodies from a suspicious Southern supplier. Anti-slavery groups demanded investigations. But down south, the response was very different. Local planters closed ranks. Rumors of abolitionist spies fueled paranoia. Churches warned of Northern lies meant to destroy our way of life. The idea of Northern men accusing honorable Southern families of murder. Unthinkable. Gabriel played his part well. He gave speeches at public gatherings, weeping as he described the false accusations against his family. "We are good Christian people," he said. "This is the devil's work, trying to destroy our name." The community believed him, or at least pretended to. Confronting the enemy. Back in Charleston, Jeremiah Morrison was now a marked man. His name had reached the wrong ears. A Charleston newspaper called him a Northern agitator stirring trouble in God-fearing communities. He was followed, threatened. One night, someone threw a rock through his boarding house window with a note tied around it, "Leave now, or you'll be buried next to your ghosts." But Morrison stayed. He had more to do. The last shipment. Despite the chaos, one final body shipment was prepared at Seraphim's Grace in November 1799. Seraph chose the specimen carefully, a strong young man, perfectly preserved. The crate was labeled as property of a merchant in Savannah and routed north by ship. But this time, authorities were watching. In Philadelphia, the crate was intercepted. The body inside was examined and identified as an escaped slave from North Carolina who had been reported missing weeks earlier. The death certificate, signed by Dr. Thorne, matched a pattern used dozens of times before. Now, there was evidence. Hard proof. The Southern Redemption Society had officially become a target of federal inquiry. Betrayal in the ranks. As pressure mounted, cracks formed within the society itself. Captain Marcus Fulton, the brutal slave catcher, began burning his records. He fled Georgia and disappeared for months, terrified of being arrested. Reverend Josiah Blackwood, the minister who had helped identify targets, was quietly removed from his pulpit after a tip reached Charleston's Methodist Council. But no charges were filed. Only one person seemed completely unbothered, Seraph Whitworth. When asked what they would do if the federal government sent marshals to investigate, Seraph smiled and said, "They'll find nothing but empty pews and ashes." Blood on the horizon. By early 1800, the society had gone underground. No more public meetings. No more letters. No more shipments. But the damage had been done. The Whitworth family, once celebrated in South Carolina, now lived behind closed shutters. Gabriel's once weekly sermons drew only a few loyal families. The plantation still ran, but the joyful noise of parties and gatherings was gone. Constance rarely left her room. Miriam took to long walks through the rice fields, her eyes distant. Lilith became quieter, though more watchful. Cain and Abel stayed busy, rebuilding what could be salvaged. Gabriel prayed, or at least, that's what he claimed to do in the chapel for hours each night. But something was changing in him. His sermons became darker. More apocalyptic. He spoke of fire, of judgment, of holy cleansing. And some nights, neighbors heard him shouting at no one. A new arrival. In the spring of 1800, a stranger arrived at the gates of Seraphim's grace. He wore a black coat and a wide-brimmed hat. His boots were dusty from long travel. His accent was northern. He introduced himself as Elijah Brand, a merchant interested in purchasing rice and sugar. But his questions were sharp, too sharp. He asked about the old chapel, the kiln, the Whitworth supply lines to Savannah. He smiled too easily when Gabriel tried to deflect. Later that night, the family gathered in the study. He's no merchant, Abel said. He's another one of them, Miriam whispered. Just like the last one. Gabriel stood slowly. Then this time, he said coldly, we don't let him leave. Closing for part 5. As the Whitworth Empire begins to crumble, their desperation turns deadly. The walls are closing in, but the family has no intention of going quietly. In part 6, a deadly game of cat and mouse begins as Elijah Brand uncovers the final pieces of the puzzle, and comes face to face with the darkest room in Angel's Rest Chapel. Stay with us. Studio Microphone Part 6, Into the Mouth of Hell. When Elijah Brand walked through the gates of Seraphim's Grace in the spring of 1800, he wasn't just a merchant, he was a trained investigator. Abolitionists had sent him south under a new identity to confirm what Samuel Washington and others had reported. Elijah wasn't just looking for the truth, he was hunting monsters. But the Whitworth family had learned from past mistakes. This time, they were ready. The perfect guest. Elijah was greeted warmly by Michael Whitworth, Gabriel's brother and plantation overseer. Michael wore a worn hat and carried a whip on his hip, but his voice was soft and businesslike. You're from Maryland, you say? Michael asked. Baltimore, Elijah replied with a smile. Looking to buy rice for export. I hear your family has the best fields this side of the river. Michael nodded. You heard right. They shook hands. That night, Elijah dined with the family. Gabriel prayed over the food. Constance offered small talk. Miriam asked polite questions about trade routes. Lilith poured wine. Cain and Abel said almost nothing. But the air was thick with tension. Elijah felt eyes on him at all times. He wasn't the first man to arrive with too many questions. But he intended to be the last. Secrets in the chapel. The next morning, Elijah asked to see the chapel. I heard it's the oldest in the county, he said, keeping his tone casual. They say angels built it with their own hands. Gabriel smiled coldly. That's what they say. He agreed to show Elijah the building. Together, they walked the winding path through the oaks. The old chapel stood quiet in the rising sun, its Gothic windows glowing with colored light. Inside, Elijah scanned every corner. The altar, the pews, the painting of the archangel. He remembered Samuel Washington's description, especially the hidden door behind the altar. Gabriel stood close beside him. You seem interested in more than just rice, Mr. Brand. Elijah smiled politely. History fascinates me. I collect stories. Gabriel's voice dropped. Some stories are best forgotten. A locked room. Elijah stayed at the plantation for 3 days. He walked the rice fields. Spoke with workers. Observed the layout of buildings. He noted the smoke coming from the pottery kiln that never seemed to cool down. But he couldn't get into the chapel's basement. Every time he got too close, one of the Whitworths appeared, Miriam with a question, Seraph with a casual comment, Cain offering a drink. They were watching him around the clock. And then came the turning point. On the 4th night, Elijah returned to his room and found his belongings had been searched. His journal, where he recorded every detail, was missing. Someone had found out who he really was. A voice in the dark. That same night, Elijah was woken by a whisper outside his window. He peeked through the shutters and saw a small figure, one of the enslaved children from the plantation. She held something in her hand, his journal. When he met her outside, she didn't speak. She simply handed him the book, then pointed toward the woods. There, hidden in the dark, Elijah met 2 young field hands who had escaped from the main house. They confirmed everything. There are people locked under that chapel, one whispered. I seen 'em dragged down at night. Cryin', screamin', ain't none come back. And that doctor, said the other. He don't fix nobody, he just cuts 'em. Elijah thanked them. Leave tonight. Head for the river. I'll send someone for you. Then he returned to his room and prepared for the endgame. The last sermon. The next day was Sunday. As usual, the Whitworths hosted a private service in the chapel. 15 local families gathered to hear Gabriel preach about the end of days and the punishment of the wicked. Elijah sat in the second row, notebook hidden under his coat. Gabriel's voice thundered from the altar. The Lord shall burn away the unclean with fire, and only the chosen shall remain. In that moment, Elijah knew Gabriel was preparing to burn it all down. After the service, Miriam approached Elijah with a smile too wide to be real. "Brother Brand," she said sweetly, "Father would like to speak with you alone tonight." In the chapel, Elijah nodded. Of course, he knew what it meant. The trap. That night, Elijah carried a pistol in his coat and a small vial of quicklime in his boot, meant to blind attackers if needed. He also left a note in the stable for a local worker, instructing him to deliver a message to Jeremiah Morrison in Charleston the moment Elijah failed to return by morning. At midnight, he entered the chapel. Gabriel was waiting near the altar. Seraph stood behind him, silent. Cain leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Miriam lit candles with shaking hands. Gabriel stepped forward. "You're not a merchant. You're a spy." Another lie from the north. Elijah didn't deny it. "You kill innocent people," he said. "You sell bodies like they're bags of grain. And you call that salvation?" Gabriel's face twisted with rage. "They are not innocent," he barked. "They are the broken tools of a broken world. We are the ones who clean the rot." Seraph moved toward Elijah, a long scalpel glinting in his hand. But Elijah pulled the pistol first. "Don't move," he said. The room froze. "I'm leaving," Elijah continued. "And if I don't make it, the men waiting for me outside will burn this place to the ground." A beat of silence. Then, gunfire. Elijah fired at Seraph, catching him in the shoulder. Cain lunged forward but was blocked by Miriam, who screamed in panic. Elijah ran. Into the swamp. He burst from the chapel and sprinted down the path toward the stables. Behind him, dogs barked. Voices shouted. He leapt onto a horse and rode straight into the swamp. Bullets whizzed past him, but the darkness and tangled trees gave him cover. He rode all night. By dawn, he reached the edge of Charleston and collapsed at Morrison's safe house. He had made it. The consequences. With Elijah's full report, witnesses' testimonies, and intercepted shipping records, a federal case was finally opened. But the South protected its own. When U.S. Marshals arrived at Seraphim's Grace a week later, they found the plantation house burned to the ground. The chapel was gutted. The basement flooded. The Whitworths had vanished. Some said they escaped to Cuba. Others believed they retreated into the swamps and built a new chapel, deeper and darker than before. No one knows for sure. Closing for Part 6. But evil doesn't disappear. It hides. It adapts. And sometimes, it survives by turning into legend. In Part 7, we'll explore the whispers that followed the Whitworth bloodline into the 1800s, tales of strange gatherings, missing travelers, and a chapel that still stands where no road leads. The Whitworths may be gone from history books, but the darkness they left behind still lives in the South Carolina swamps. Stay with us. Studio Microphone Part 7, Whispers in the Swamp. After the fiery end of Seraphim's Grace in 1800, it seemed like the nightmare was over. Federal agents returned empty-handed. The Whitworth family, once powerful, feared, and untouchable, had vanished without a trace. Their plantation was in ashes, their records destroyed, their bodies never found. To the world, the case had gone cold. But to the people who lived near the lowcountry swamps, something far darker remained. Because even though the plantation burned, the chapel never did. The lonely path. Locals avoided the land where Seraphim's Grace once stood. Travelers claimed their horses refused to walk the old road leading to the ruined chapel. Some said they heard faint singing from the trees, soft voices in Latin or ancient hymns that made the skin crawl. Fishermen swore they saw pale figures walking the riverbank at night. In 1804, 4 teenagers from nearby Colton County wandered into the woods on a dare, determined to find what was left of Angel's Rest Chapel. Only one made it back. The boy, shaking and wide-eyed, told his parents he had seen candles glowing through the stained glass windows, and a girl with golden hair smiling at him from inside. He swore it was Lilith Whitworth, though she would have been over 23 by then and presumed dead. But when neighbors returned with him the next morning, the chapel door was nailed shut from the inside. A new cult rises. That same year, a small religious sect began forming deep in the Lowcountry. They called themselves the Order of Saint Seraphim. They claimed to offer refuge to the lost and the damned, those broken by war, poverty, or sin. Their leader was a tall man with silver hair and ice-blue eyes, known only as Brother Raphael. Some believed he was Gabriel Whitworth under a false name. The order kept to themselves. They built cabins in the swamp, planted crops, raised their children in silence. But strange things kept happening near their camp. Children disappeared from nearby towns. Graveyards were robbed. And once a year, on the spring equinox, fires could be seen burning from deep inside the trees, fires that burned blue. The midwife's story. In 1807, a woman named Eleanor Kessler, a traveling midwife, visited the swamp to help deliver a baby for a young member of the order. She stayed there for 2 nights. When she came back, she was never the same. Eleanor stopped working, refused to speak about what she saw. She would only say this: the baby was born with no soul in its eyes. And the mother sang a lullaby in Latin, while someone watched from the shadows. When a doctor asked what she meant, Eleanor simply said, "Greater than, they're not gone. They've just changed the rules." The Hollow Hill Murders. In 1811, a tragedy shook a farming community west of the swamp. 6 members of the Lawton family were found murdered in their home. Their bodies showed signs of advanced decomposition, even though they had only been dead for a day. The only survivor was an elderly woman named Agnes, who lived in a separate cabin on the property. She told the sheriff she had seen a pale girl come out of the forest the night before, blonde, quiet, barefoot, and knocked gently at the front door. "She smiled like a doll," Agnes whispered. And the moment they let her in, the lights in the house went out. No one believed her, until they found strange symbols carved into the walls, symbols that matched markings found in the basement of the original Angel's Rest Chapel. Sightings of Lilith. By the 1810s, the legend of Lilith Whitworth had grown into a southern ghost story. Travelers swore they saw her walking along old plantation roads at twilight. Always barefoot, always smiling. Some said she carried a porcelain doll. Others claimed she had no eyes at all, just hollow sockets that stared straight into your soul. Folk songs were written about her. Children were warned, greater than, don't follow the lights in the swamp. Lilith walks there, and she wants a friend. But some stories were harder to dismiss. A federal agent named James Pruitt, investigating illegal grave robbing near Charleston in 1816, disappeared for 6 days. When he returned, he refused to talk, just handed in his badge and left the state. His journal, later found in his room, said, "Greater than, the Whitworths are not a family. They're a disease. And it's still spreading." A hidden chapel. In 1819, a small-time treasure hunter named Rufus Greeley claimed to have found a hidden structure deep in the swamp, a second chapel, built almost entirely from black cypress wood. He said the stained glass showed no saints, only angels falling upside down in fire. The altar had no cross, only a set of human bones arranged in a perfect circle. But when he returned with others, the building was gone. Not destroyed, not burned, gone, like it had never existed. Except for one thing, a single gold ring, lying in the mud outside the spot where he swore the chapel had been. The inscription inside, "Greater than, for Lilith. The last light of grace." The message in the bottle. In 1823, a fisherman found an old glass bottle washed up on the banks of the Edisto River. Inside was a piece of brittle paper. Written in faded brown ink were the words, "Greater than, they are still here. They wear new faces. They build in the woods. They sing under the earth. And the chapel still stands, only now, it listens." The note was signed, Samuel Washington, but that couldn't be. Samuel had been reported dead 20 years earlier. His body was never found. Closing for Part 7. The Whitworth family vanished from history, but they never left the land. Something still walks in the shadows of South Carolina's forgotten swamps. And in Part 8, we follow the trail to a Union soldier in 1864, who stumbles upon a chapel that shouldn't exist, and finds out what happens when you pray in a place built on blood. Stay close. It only gets darker from here. Studio Microphone Part 8. The Soldier Who Prayed. By the time the Civil War reached its bloody peak in 1864, most people had forgotten the name Whitworth, or at least pretended to. But the swamp never forgot. And one unlucky soldier was about to find out that some battles aren't fought with guns, but with your soul. Private Thomas Bell. Private Thomas Bell, age 22, was part of a Union scouting unit moving through the South Carolina lowcountry. His orders were simple: map the terrain, gather intelligence, avoid conflict. But while crossing a flooded road one night, Thomas became separated from his unit. He wandered alone for 2 days, surviving on rainwater and hard biscuits, until he saw something in the distance, a light glowing deep within the trees. He followed it, desperate for help. What he found instead was the Angel's Rest Chapel. The building that shouldn't exist. The chapel stood just as it had been described in rumors: tall, black wood, stained glass windows glowing with unnatural color. The path leading to it was perfectly cleared, despite the overgrown wilderness around it. Strangely, there were no birds, no frogs, no insects, just stillness, and that awful silence that makes your skin itch. Inside, the air was warm. The candles were already lit, and on the front pew sat a woman. She wore a white dress. Her hair was long and golden. She turned to look at Thomas with a gentle smile. "Greater than, welcome, traveler," she whispered. "You must be tired. Lilith returns." Thomas felt a wave of calm wash over him, too calm. He didn't ask why the candles were burning. He didn't ask how she knew he was coming. He just followed her down the aisle. "Greater than, this is a place of rest," Lilith said. "A place for the lost. You may pray, if you like." Thomas knelt before the altar. He didn't believe in much, but war changes a man, and he whispered a desperate prayer for safety, for food, for a way back home. Lilith stood behind him the entire time, humming a lullaby. But when he opened his eyes, the chapel was empty. The candles were gone. The stained glass was cracked. The roof was half collapsed. And the altar was covered in dried blood. The underground door. Terrified, Thomas backed away, then tripped over something beneath the rug. A small trapdoor. He opened it. A cold gust of air struck his face. With trembling hands, he lit a match and descended into the dark. The staircase led to a narrow stone corridor, and the walls were covered in writing. Names, numbers, prayers, pleas, some scratched in with nails. Others burned into the wood. At the end of the tunnel was a small chamber, and inside it, 12 wooden boxes. Each had a brass plaque. And every plaque carried the same message. Greater than, redeemed through pain. Delivered in silence. Property of the order. The voice in the dark. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the tunnel. It wasn't Lilith. It was deeper, male, calm. "Greater than, you prayed, soldier. That means you gave permission." Thomas turned, heart pounding. He ran back toward the staircase, but the door was gone. Just smooth wall. Then the humming started again. Lilith's lullaby, soft and slow, coming from all directions. "Greater than, you were never lost, Thomas," the voice said. "You were led. The escape." Thomas did the only thing he could think of. He dropped to his knees and began to recite scripture, verses his mother had made him memorize as a boy. The humming stopped, the voice fell silent, and the wall behind him cracked open just enough to let in a sliver of moonlight. He ran. He didn't stop until he reached the riverbank, where Union troops found him the next morning, half mad and bleeding from his hands. What he brought back. Thomas Bell never spoke about what happened in the chapel, except to one man. A battlefield chaplain named Reverend James Hale. Thomas gave him a torn piece of parchment he had taken from the altar, part of an old church ledger. It read, "Greater than, delivered into redemption, Sarah James, aged 19. Light of soul, weak. Destination, Seraphim." Hale kept the page. After the war, he tried to find the chapel. He never did, but he founded a small church in Virginia, its stained glass windows designed to match the ones Thomas described. He called it, House of the True Light. Some say it was a warning. Others say it was a seal, to keep something buried. The Whisper Network. After the war, stories returned, just like they always had. Children gone missing, travelers disappearing in the swamp, old-timers claiming they saw a pale woman with golden hair walking barefoot through the fog. But the legends became darker. Now, people spoke of a ritual, a prayer whispered at midnight that could summon the chapel for just 1 hour. It was called, the Prayer of Redemption. And if you said it in the swamp, and truly believed, the chapel would appear, and you'd be given a choice. Salvation, or silence. Closing for Part 8. The war may have ended. The country may have changed. But the Whitworth legacy did not die. In Part 9, we follow a Southern journalist in 1887 who dares to publish an article about the Order of Fallen Angels, only to vanish days later, leaving behind a typewritten confession no one could explain. Stay with us. We're almost at the end. And the truth is darker than you think. Studio Microphone Part 9, The Journalist and the Typewriter. By 1887, most people believed the story of the Whitworths had faded into Southern folklore. A legend, a warning whispered around campfires. But some stories don't die, they wait. And the deeper you dig, the more they dig back. That's what happened to Edgar Mallory, a Southern journalist with a taste for scandal, who decided to chase down a ghost story. And ended up leaving behind a confession typed by hands that were no longer his own. The Charleston Ledger. Edgar Mallory wasn't like most reporters. He didn't care about society news or local politics. He wanted what people were afraid to talk about: murders, disappearances, strange cults and forgotten towns. In the summer of 1887, he received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sentence, typed on yellowed paper. Greater than, they're still here. Look for the place where the angels rest. Attached was a photograph, faded and damaged, showing a black wooden chapel half hidden in the trees. Mallory's instincts screamed story, so he packed a bag and headed to Colton County, South Carolina. The trip to nowhere. Locals were less than helpful. At every stop, when Mallory mentioned the word chapel, people grew quiet. Some turned away. One old man warned him. Greater than, you walk toward that place, boy, you'll never walk the same again. Still, Mallory pressed on. He followed old maps, hunted down faded property records, and finally found mention of a plantation long erased from memory, Seraphim's Grace. The record said it burned in 1800. But an 1865 land survey noted a structure still standing, on the northern edge of the property, unclaimed, unnamed, and unvisited. That's where Mallory went. He found it. In his notes, later discovered in his satchel, he described it like this. Greater than, a chapel of black wood, sunken into the marsh like a coffin waiting for dirt. Stained glass covered in moss. Doors locked from the inside. But the bells still ring, though there's no wind. Mallory camped nearby. That night, he heard voices. Not whispers, but singing. Children's voices. In Latin. He followed the sound through the dark trees, and in his final written note, scribbled by lantern light, he wrote. Greater than, I saw them. The Whitworth children. They haven't aged. They were standing at the altar. Lilith smiled at me, and then I blacked out. The typewriter confession. 2 days later, a train conductor found Edgar Mallory wandering barefoot near the Charleston station, mud-covered, shaking, and silent. He was taken to a hospital. He wouldn't speak, but when doctors gave him a typewriter, hoping to help him process his trauma, he began to write. For 72 hours, he typed without food or water. His fingers bled. His eyes didn't blink. When he was done, he collapsed. The final document was 42 pages long. What it said, Mallory's confession, known now as the Seraphim transcript, contained disturbing detail. Names of families that had gone missing since the 1790s. Descriptions of underground rooms beneath the chapel, new ones not seen before. A list of rituals practiced by a group calling itself the Redeemed Lineage. A prophecy, supposedly spoken by Gabriel Whitworth himself. Greater than, in every generation, a vessel will carry our light. In every century, a child will walk the blood path. And the chapel shall remain until the final soul repents. The transcript ended with one chilling line. Greater than, I am no longer Edgar Mallory. I am simply, witness. His fate. Edgar was moved to an asylum in Virginia. He never spoke again. One nurse reported that he would occasionally hum a tune at night, soft, slow, and strangely familiar. When asked what the song was, she said, Greater than, it sounded like a lullaby. One of those old hymns, but twisted. He died in 1891. Buried in an unmarked grave. But the typewriter, the one he used to confess it all, was passed from reporter to reporter for decades. Every person who owned it, vanished. Until it was locked away in the Charleston Historical Society archives, where it sits to this day, the ribbon still stained dark, like dried blood. Whispers from below. After Mallory's story leaked, local legend flared up again. A church group tried to burn down what they believed was the chapel in 1893. They all died in a fire that started from inside the building. A preacher from Savannah disappeared in 1899 after investigating the Seraphim prophecy. A mapmaker in 1902 discovered the swamp near the old Whitworth land was shaped like a human heart, and the chapel stood at its center. And one child, visiting from Virginia in 1905, returned from a walk in the woods with a strange question for his mother. Greater than, why do the angels have no eyes, Mommy? And why do they whisper my name? Closing for part 9. The Whitworths never left. They adapted. They changed names, faces, symbols. But their purpose remains the same: to redeem the world through blood, suffering, and silence. In part 10, we uncover the final chapter, a modern excavation team in 1923 that enters the ruins of Angel's Rest Chapel, and finally opens the sealed vault. What they find changes American history forever. Don't miss the terrifying conclusion. We've come too far to turn back now. Part 10. The Vault Beneath the Chapel. In the spring of 1923, after nearly a century of silence, the U.S. Historical Preservation Society sent an excavation team into the South Carolina Lowcountry. Their goal: document the ruins of a plantation destroyed in 1800. Their destination: the last known location of the Angel's Rest Chapel. They had no idea what they were walking into. But after that day, nothing in American historical records could ever be trusted again. The Forgotten Vault. The team included archaeologists, preservationists, and 2 federal investigators. What they found was confusing. The main house of Seraphim's grace was gone. No foundation, no walls, just blackened soil. The rice fields had vanished under thick cypress trees. But the chapel was still standing. The wood was warped and rotting. Moss covered every inch. But structurally, the chapel remained intact. Inside, the air was strangely cold, too cold for April. There were no birds in the trees. No wind, and in the center of the chapel's altar was a rusted iron circle. A hatch, sealed with chains. They opened it. One man, Drive, Leland Morris, insisted they document everything. He ordered the hatch unchained. It took 3 hours. The metal screeched as it opened. The smell that followed, rot, sulfur, old blood, made men vomit. They descended slowly, one by one, into the darkness below. They found a stone tunnel. Carved messages lined the walls. Hundreds of names, many scratched with fingernails. Some were still fresh. The tunnel ended at a massive circular vault, reinforced with metal beams. Inside were filing cabinets, boxes, ledgers, bones, thousands of bones. The ledgers. What the team uncovered in that vault became known as the Whitworth documents. A full accounting of the order's activities from 1789 to 1862. Victim lists, payment records, routes used for transporting bodies, medical sketches from Seraph Whitworth, personal notes from Gabriel, Constance, and Lilith, letters from ministers, professors, ship captains, judges, all part of the Southern Redemption Society. Each ledger was marked with a date and a verse. Greater than, he who delivers pain shall know peace. Order of the Fallen Angels, Book of Grace, Chapter 4. The skeleton in the chair. In the far corner of the vault sat a wooden chair, and in it, the skeletal remains of a woman. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her spine was perfectly straight. She wore a white dress, now yellowed with age. On her finger was a gold ring with the inscription, "Greater than, for Lilith, the last light of grace." Her skull had been shaved, and carved into the forehead, so deep it cracked the bone, was a single word. Witness. The doors slammed shut. As the team documented everything, something changed. The wind picked up outside, though there had been no wind all morning. Candles, which no one had lit, flickered to life on the chapel altar above. And then came the voices. Not screams, whispers. Thousands of whispers, in 100 different tongues, all saying the same thing. Greater than, you opened the gate. You broke the seal. The iron hatch slammed shut. 3 men died trying to escape the tunnel. 2 were never found. Only Drive, Morris returned, covered in blood, eyes wide, unable to speak. The sealing order. After the incident, the U.S. government declared the site federally restricted. All recovered documents were sealed under national security classification, citing moral and psychological danger to the public. But a few pages leaked. And those pages told the truth. The Whitworths operated for over 70 years. Their victims numbered in the thousands. Their order had survived the Civil War, changed names, and quietly influenced religious, political, and academic institutions. And most disturbing of all, a page dated January 3, 1923, just 3 months before the excavation, read, "Greater than, Lilith has returned. The chapel breathes again. The new century has begun. Where it stands today, no map shows the chapel's location. The land is privately owned. Access is forbidden. Armed guards patrol the woods. But strange things still happen. In 1964, a park ranger vanished within a 3-mile radius of the site. In 1987, a family camping nearby reported hearing children singing in Latin. In 2015, a drone flew over the area and lost GPS, only to reappear 3 hours later with 800 photographs of a chapel no one had seen in decades. And every year, on the spring equinox, a white dress appears folded neatly at the Charleston docks. Dry, clean, fresh, The final words. They say the Angels Rest Chapel was a place of mercy. A place for the lost. But if mercy means silence, if redemption means pain, then maybe we were never meant to find it. Because the truth is greater than the Whitworths never needed to survive. They just needed to plant the seed. And it has already grown. Clapperboard closing message for video. If you've made it this far, you are now part of the witnesses. Share this story, but speak it only once. Some names are best left in the dark. And if you ever hear soft singing in the woods, don't follow it. Because redemption may not be what you think it is.